Thanks for joining, and we've got a nice big panel here that I am just doing the introductions and kind of playing the host here. They're going to do all the talking, and we just want to have some time today to talk about the different funding opportunities that are out there and available, and what these folks' experience is in filling out the applications, what hurdles they ran into, what questions came up. And we want to hear from you who are out there listening, so please use the chat, especially if you've got questions for these panelists. We'll try to watch the chat, make sure those questions get out to them so that you can ask questions if you've been having trouble getting these applications completed or whatever. We just want to be sure that we're maximizing everybody's opportunity to get and access all the money that is possible for you to get through this really difficult time right now. So as the panelists go through, I'm going to ask the panelists just to kind of go down in order that, or I'll call your name, I guess, that might be easier. And if you'll just introduce yourself, who you're with and your position, and then what kind of funding you have applied for and or received. So we kind of know where people are at. We've got, you know, the payroll protection program, we've got the federal COVID assistance program, and then we've got the COVID CARES money that we're working through the state. And if anybody has other funding sources outside of those three that I have listed off that you know about, please share those as well. So let's go ahead and get started with introductions. And Dawn Schmidt, I see you're first on my list. And I see the whole panel is muted. Ika, can you help me unmute? Because I can't unmute people. There we go.
They also should, yeah, they can unmute themselves as well.
Okay.
So if you're a panelist, you'll be able to unmute. Just make sure you unmute your line, and you also unmute with your microphone there next to your name on the screen.
Okay, I'm Dawn Schmidt. I'm with Behavior Intervention Services, and I'm the Executive Director here.
Okay, and what kind of funding have you applied for or received?
We got the CARES Act Provider Relief Fund for Medicaid. It's the federal one, so we received that last week. And we did also do that PPP loan. We got that one a couple months ago. So,
awesome. Okay, thank you. Gary?
Hi, this is Gary Schanzmar, Deputy Director at DD, and I am finalizing and getting the payments through for the Providers Relief Fund that's coming from the department.
Thank you. Jeff Aldridge?
Hi, this is Jeff Harlage. I am the Chief Financial Officer for Easter Seals Midwest. We applied for and received the HSS Provider Relief Funds, and then also the State CARES Act money. We have an allocation for that.
Great, thank you. And hopefully I'm going to get your name right. John Stolk? Did I pronounce that even close?
Oh, that's pretty good. It's Telke. I am the Finance Director for the Developmental Disabilities Resource Board in St. Charles County, and we applied for and received funding for the Provider Relief Fund. We just got ours last week.
Okay, thank you. And then the next, we just got Casey, Todd, and Kathy.
Hi there, we're with Learning Opportunities Quality Works Incorporated and Macon County Commission for Developmental Disability Citizens, sorry. And we have applied for the Paycheck Protection Program, which we received. We applied for the Provider Relief Fund, which we received. We received the DMH Emergency Business Interruption Grant. We've also are in the process of applying for the CARES Act grant for Marion, Macon, and Monroe counties. And we have recently applied for the Missouri Nonprofit Relief and Recovery Grant, which is still pending.
Wow. Okay, so there's some extra grants there that we hadn't listed before. We'll talk more about those. Thank you. And Kimberly Moore?
Hi, my name's Kim Moore. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Emmaus Homes, and we received the HHS Provider Relief Fund money. We applied and received that, and then we'll also be utilizing the state's allocation of the CARES Act, the federal money as well.
Okay, thank you. Peg Capo?
Hi, everybody. I'm Peg Capo. I'm the Executive Director of the Developmental Disabilities Resource Board of St. Charles County. The only thing I would add to the mix, John talked about our big grant request and receiving that. We've also been working with the county. I know this is kind of state and federal money, but we did also work with our county to access resources to help with PPE for many of our providers.
Very good. Thanks, Peg. And Wanda Crocker.
Good afternoon. I am the Provider Relations State Lead for the Division of DD, and I am working with Gary and all of the reviewers at the local level regarding the DD CARES Fund for provider relief.
All right, thanks, Wanda. So I know one of the numbers that we have been getting back for providers who have applied for that federal COVID relief fund have been considerably low given the number of providers that we've got out there. And I know that not having gone through it, but hearing Gary talk about it and others, that the application process was pretty challenging. I think I saw today that they do have a new application out there, and I hope I'm right on that, but I know that they were coming out with a new application process, which is also part of why they extended the deadline on that. And is that extended to the 28th of this month? Is that right? Is anybody here? Okay.
That sounds correct.
Yes.
Okay. So let's start with talking about that funding opportunity. And those of you, I think it's most all of you on the panel, providers on the panel have been successful in getting that. So I'm just going to ask somebody to jump in and start and talk about their experience and if they had identified any tricks or if they had to get some help with doing it, what they kind of ran into and what their experience was.
Well, hi, this is Jeff Harlage. I guess I have a different experience than what you're hearing. I thought it was very easy to complete and open to different perspectives. And I'll share, I guess, why I think that. But there's a guide for the application. You know, you have to create your profile. You submit your FEIN. If it's accepted, you find out right away. And then you just upload your most recent 990. They tell you which revenue they're looking at from the 990. We didn't alter that. I wouldn't suggest you do alter that number. Then you have to explain why. Obviously, if you're an older 990, the revenue is going to be old, and you may want to alter that, and maybe that's what caused some of the confusion. You just need an NPI number. We have multiple NPI numbers, so I selected what is sort of the main one, and I use that. No reason to use the FTE tool. So all of our FTEs were non-primary care. That's really focused for hospitals or physician practices, something like that. And then obviously you need to know your payer mix. So that's easily obtained from our financial system. So that's really all there was to it. I mean, you have to go through the steps and you have to select the answers or not select the answers and all that. I completed our application on June 23rd, and the funds were direct deposited on July 22nd. I was going on vacation, so and that was over the course of the original deadline before they extended it the first time. So I was actually able to call and speak with somebody because there was no way, at least that I found, to get a status update. Or I wanted to make sure that everything was submitted, given that I was on vacation. I didn't want to come back and say, "Oh, you didn't submit this piece of information, so you're out of luck." But I was able to actually speak with someone, and she said, "No, you're good. You got your confirmation that you submitted it." So there was no further action required on our part.
Well, that's
I
encouraging.
This is Dawn. I was going to add when he said about knowing the status, that was my probably biggest, like, oh my gosh, what's happening? When I submitted for the 10, you know, you do that first step to verify that, you know, your 10's okay, and or your NPI number's okay. And when I did that, the system didn't, like, it just said that it was pending. And I didn't know how long it would take, and it was when the first deadline hadn't, the one deadline had not been extended. So I ended up calling, and I will say they were great over the phone. I called them twice. And so when I called them, I said, you know, am I going to be, you know, is it going to verify in time for me to submit the rest of the information? And they said, yes. Once you do that step, you're in, and then you have that time to finish your application. It did alert me then that I could go back in and do my application, so I did. And then when I did my application, again, the system doesn't tell you the status, so it actually looked like I hadn't submitted it, but I did. And so, you know, because I even had an email confirmation I submitted it, but when you go back into your portal, it looks like it's waiting for you to submit it. And I thought that was odd. So I called them again, and they said, no, that's fine. And it took about 10 days, and then we got the deposit, and I was able to do the attestation after that. So.
Awesome. So it sounds like the status update is a problem.
Yeah. This is Kim from Emmaus. I had the exact, those were the only really, I'll speak about the status update being kind of ambiguous. I have some print screens of that if anybody needs to see it, what that looks like, because she's right. The lady who just spoke is right. It's still, there's a little caution sign almost that says that it's still waiting for information when clearly it's not. So the second thing that Jeff from Easter Seals spoke about that gave me a little pause when I was trying to figure out what I should list was we also have multiple NPI numbers that we receive payments from. And so I just went to Seymour and went under our information in Seymour and looked to see which NPI number that Seymour had listed for us. And that's used, and I also didn't have any problems with that.
Anybody else have experience with that particular application? And folks that are online, we've got 72 people here that are joining us. If you have questions about who can apply or the parameters of it, or if you know, let us know if you've already applied and you're waiting or whatever. Just help us see where you're at in the process, and if there's anything that the folks on the panel here can help you answer or point you in a direction.
Yeah, this is John Telke again. I'm going to give, I would agree that the status updates were very confusing. When it does show up as pending, or when you go back in, once you have your email that says, yes, you've applied, when you go back in, it looks like you haven't. So I was sort of waiting for that August 3rd deadline to think about making that call like a couple days before. And then I was notified by our bank that we had a deposit in there. So that's how I got notified that we had received our funds. And then later we got some email confirmation. But one thing I wanted to, since we're a taxing entity, we don't have to file a 990. There's a little bit of a different perspective there. We had to provide our audit. And because we provide case management, we're able to get the waiver funding dollars. So we just had to, so if there are any taxing entities, if you want to call me, it's a slightly different process than some of my counterparts had to use, because what I did is instead of reinventing the wheel, I reached out to a couple of our SB 40 partners that had already done this. And I said, well, how did you do this? And so for me, that was not the easiest way, but the easiest way for me to understand that, along with the frequently asked questions. I just printed that out and I could answer most of my questions that way. But that was, we did have to do the FTEs because we had people, with the waiver dollars and the like. So, but even that wasn't that difficult. You just had to, you follow the instructions on the worksheet and it worked pretty good.
I did the FTE. This is Dawn again, the FT worksheet as well with our accountant because of the status of our agency. And it was fairly easy to dump that information in. The only thing I wasn't sure on, and I did end up using it, we have multiple BCBAs that have MPI numbers as well, individual ones. So I did enter them on the FTE sheet. It didn't seem to matter. And the other thing that I might want to throw out, that it was an initial stumping kind of thing for me and the accountant, was when it asks you your applicant type, we don't really fit into an applicant type. So we went with AG. I don't know what other people use, but I mean, it worked for us. We got our funding, so.
Can somebody talk more about the applicant type, and did anybody else choose something different, or how would you know what to choose?
Yeah, if you look in the instructions under field 5, it lists the different applicant types. And AG is for agencies.
Okay.
So.
Is that what you all?
Yeah, Emmaus Homes is an agency, yes. Matter of fact, in the narrative, which is very small, the description there, it does list developmental disabled services, et cetera. So that answered my question fairly quickly.
One thing I want to chime in with really quick is if there are several of you that are submitting questions in the chat box, that's fantastic. We love that. Make sure that when you do that, you send those to all panelists. If you just send them to the host, I'm the only one that's seeing them, and the folks that are on the team there to help answer those questions are not seeing them. Or you can submit those questions in the Q&A box.
For other SB 40 boards that are doing only case management, you can choose CA as the applicant type.
And what's CA?
That's case management.
Okay. So, and I see that one of the questions that came in, and thanks, Jeff, for answering it, but if there are people who aren't following in the chat, there was a question that came in, who did you contact to verify that your information was sufficient? And Jeff responded that there is a contact number listed on the information on the website. And so it sounds like they had enough people that they were fairly responsive when you called in.
Yeah, I don't even recall having that long a wait time, and the number was easy to, there's a lot of information there, and obviously I don't recall the number, but it was easy enough to find, and I just called it, and the lady was very helpful.
Yeah, I found them to be very helpful. I called them twice, and both times, I think the second time I did have a little bit of a wait, but they were extremely helpful. They offered, like, did you need anything else? Like, they definitely are trying to help you make sure you get through the process.
Yeah.
That's refreshing.
I wanted to bring up one more thing because I don't want it to surprise anybody. Depending on the level of funding, the federal funding that you're going to receive, you need to be aware that you could be subject to a single audit threshold for federal funds. So just keep an eye on that. Be sure you're documenting all of your expenses. The HHS website has some information on that. They've got actually quite a bit of information on that. So just know that. Just don't let it surprise you if you're receiving quite a bit of money. or plan to receive quite a bit of money, that you could be subject to that of the federal funds.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend that you carefully read the attestation, and then the FAQs do mention that single federal audit. I mean, the uses for the funds are pretty broad, which is nice. Obviously, you can't double up, as with any of these funds. You can't use two funding sources to pay for the same expense. So you need to keep very accurate and diligent records between the various funds you may receive. But
So there's a question that came in, and I think maybe you were partially responding to that. There's a question that an agency has accessed PPP, HHS stimulus, MARF, and DMH business interruption allocation funds, and does this preclude us from qualifying for the funds being discussed? So can someone elaborate on that question a little bit more? Is it all of those funds if they received them? Do you have to really delineate what expenses you were requesting those funds for? I doubt that the MARF funds, I'm assuming maybe that's for the Station MD technical stuff. Does somebody know that the Station MD technology grant? I'm not sure about other MARF funds.
I received the MARF funds for like purchasing medical equipment, which like blood pressure cuffs, and that didn't have an impact, nor did it even ask questions about it. The only thing that I was a little fuzzy about, I have not applied for the DMH yet because I was still kind of going through some questions on my local funding, but is if you receive the federal funds and you put in that an expense was payroll or a cost, can you also do that on the DMH one? And then the DMH one, I didn't know as far as the two, my understanding is the PPP loan does not, that's a different kind of, like that one doesn't count against you on these other ones, is my understanding.
This is Casey. We have applied for everything you listed aside from the HHS stimulus, and it did not seem to interfere with the provider relief fund. Of course, as she was saying, we can't double charge for things, so we're just kind of trying to keep things separated.
So like maybe if one fund didn't cover all of the expenses for a particular category, you could request the balance in another funding request to another source. But you just need to keep track of that it's not a duplication of funds. Is that right?
correct.
So,
In the FAQs for the provider relief, it actually addresses whether you can also receive the PPE funds, which you can. But again, you can't say, okay, I got the PPP that covers 10,000 of labor expense, for example, but then you can't also say, I get the provider relief funds that cover that same 10,000. You just
right.
you can't get paid twice for the same expense, in other words.
Okay. And so Barry, I hope that's getting to your question. He also entered in there that nothing has yet covered hazard pay. So that seems to be something that could be requested. Gary, can you speak to that? I think that is an allowable expense to turn in under the DMH business, the COVID fund.
Yeah, if you had additional expenses for hazard pay, yes, that would be.
So just the premium, correct? The part that's not covered by the hourly rate for your direct support through Medicaid.
Right. It would be anything in additional to what you normally had.
I want to mention one other thing that I remember. I wouldn't say confused me. I just thought it was odd. I already had an Optum ID because we use Optum for our health plan. And so when I used my existing Optum ID for this, some reason or another, it thought we were a dental provider. So I just remember, like, when I signed in to start one of the processes, it said, welcome to like the Optum Dental Network. And I called the number, the Optum help number that Jeff has put in the chat. And they said, oh, no, that's fine. It's just, it just depends how your Optum ID was set up.
Anybody else have information or experiences to share with applying for the federal monies?
I'll share just one last bit of information that I thought was helpful. When you get your email that says view completed application, and you click into that and go to DocuSign, which is where it will take you, you can actually print a summary page that shows the audit trail of when you began your application, when it was submitted. I just thought it was helpful to have for like our auditors, for our record keeping purposes. So you can actually see the entire process of when you initiated it and when it has timestamps on everything.
Oh, that's good. So can you guys talk just for a second about what kind of expenses you submitted for this funding source versus, you know, obviously the payroll protection program is for payroll related costs, but just to spark people's imaginations about what all you thought and covered under your COVID expenses. Like, was there PPE? You included PPE? Did you include the hazard pay? Overtime?
This is Dawn. What I included in mine was my day services was shut down. So we had those services in there, as well as our behavior therapy services that took a huge hit in revenue. So where it asked for loss of revenues, we've been tracking that from day one. And I was able to enter that number in. And then for increased expenses, I included, there was not a lot of PPE because we couldn't get it, but there was a lot of household cleaning things that were needed, hand sanitizers, you know, those types of things. And so, you know, all the ISLs were needing just increased cleaning supplies, and we took real good track of that. And then the other thing I included on that increased expenses was we did a hazard pay for a 3-month period. And so we included that amount, as well as we were paying for, during that time, an employee's positive COVID that left them out of work for 2 weeks. We paid them for that. So that's what all we included. We did not get everything that we lost or incurred. We only got a fraction of it. So that's something to note as well.
But they did cover lost revenue and not just expenses?
Yeah, so line 13 on it asked for lost revenues due to COVID, and line 14 asked for your increased expenses. I put my total amounts in there because, you know, we've been tracking both those items, and we did not, so that was easy enough to put in there. And like I said, we didn't receive that total amount. Right. We just received a portion of it.
Right, okay. We have a question in here that someone says that they tried to print the application, but the site would not load it when they went to download and try and print the application. Does anybody have any ideas?
Yes. You can download the DocuSign application. I mean, we use DocuSign, so I have a DocuSign user ID, but go to the DocuSign site. Matter of fact, I think if you click on the link under the View Completed Application, I believe there's a link there to sign up with DocuSign. And then once you get into that DocuSign site, you can go, if I remember right, there's tabs on top, and one of them will show all the previous documents that you've completed with DocuSign.
Okay. Sorry, something just popped up in my way here.
And you know what? Someone else was talking about loss of revenue. I know for us, it was important because we're planning on utilizing the Department of Mental Health CARES Act money that they're passing through from the federal government. So the HHS Provider Relief Fund does allow for loss of revenue, and Department of Mental Health, their reimbursement clearly excludes loss of revenue. So if while you're planning for how you're going to allocate your federal grant funds or federal money, you might want to keep that in mind.
So, and I see that you put in there that you would be happy to email a copy of the application or the site. If Melody, if you want to share your email address with Casey, she can do that. So is there anything else to add here about this federal funding program? Any other questions?
I think just to add what John and Kim have said about the expenses, any technology expense. So I think we probably all have increase in our virtual platform expense. I included that. I included increase in healthcare expense related to COVID. It seems like I thought of something else, but I forgot it.
What about unemployment? Did you have unemployment go up?
Yeah, it went way up. I did not include that because I didn't have our quarterly number at the time, but that is certainly an very significant increase in expense for us. But we're going through all the, responding to them all, and it'll be a while before we know how many of them actually get it versus how many get declined and all that, but certainly an increase there as well.
Sure. Okay. Anything else relevant to the federal funds? Gary, you want to go ahead?
Let me just throw out, so if you applied early and were denied that your tax ID wasn't eligible, I just got notified today because I was applying as a provider, because the state is a provider for waivers and TCM services, and we got denied because our tax ID had already been used on the first round of CRF funding. I just got notified today that our tax ID was approved. So I know that they've been having really slow response to this, so maybe they're going back and rethinking some stuff. But so if you got denied, maybe you'll get notification that it's been approved. I don't know.
That's good to know. Gary, you want to talk a little bit about the DMH funding pot, the COVID CARES funding, and what they can apply for that? I think I heard someone talking about the expenses and also loss of revenue in certain circumstances is covered, isn't it? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Right. So we have two different grants. One is for the employment and day services. That is interruption of business and expenses. And so those are flat grant amounts that we're sending out, and you just have to do the attestation. Even though it would ask you for a dollar amount on there, that's kind of for tracking, and that was part of the application process. But we're paying out the grant amount. For residential, it is for specific expenses, and not necessarily loss of revenue, but it has to be for actual expenses. And there's the invoice packet, but I mean, most of you all are familiar with that. So that's the difference between those two things. And we're following a process that was already approved in the state of Missouri on the social services side. So if you applied for something through More Health Net Social Services, you probably noticed the attestation forms look very similar. I know I've already signed, I've approved 10 applications already, and I understand there's about 40 coming my way. So they are starting to roll in pretty heavy.
And Wanda, I think it's you and your team are reviewing those applications. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you've seen, if there's been things that have been missing or just common trends that you're seeing there that could help people?
Sure. Just to reaffirm what Gary recently said, we do have 345 providers eligible for this funding. To date, we've currently received 42 requests, and we have returned approximately 65% of those due to errors. And I would say that's on the light side because I probably don't have all of the comments entered in the tracker yet. There's really not a theme of one particular issue that we're returning applications for. I think if you pointed to a line item on the form, it's a good chance that somebody's misentering something there. The biggest one that's been missed is in the very first paragraph, the provider is required to enter their organization name. And for some reason, that just escaped all of us in training and in reviewing, and then providers who submitted. And so that was a very easy, technical assistance question. That was the biggest one. We found some NPIs that were associated with state plan contracts, not DD contracts. So, you have to be real careful, as previous panelists have said, in using the right identifiers. So we're catching those. In general, just, where it says, put your name, put your org name, people are missing those spots. Another common thing is in the DAHAB employment service attestation, there is a paragraph that is labeled number 2. It's not the second paragraph, but it's labeled number 2. There is a date of signature required. So you're indicating the from period and the to period of lost revenue. And that 2 is the end date, and that date is supposed to be the same as the signature on the document. That space is frequently empty, and it just says date of signature, and we have to turn it back and say that you have to actually enter a date there. It should match the date of your signature. We have gotten some that for some reason didn't match the date of the signature, and we just let it go because perhaps you were going off of the last data that you had at the end of the previous month. But there has to be a date there. So a lot of it's just missing because the form doesn't have, it's not highlighted or a different font where you're supposed to actually enter information on those attestations. So it's just people missing blanks. On the group home ISL invoice, we've received invoices without signatures, titles, and dates. So it's on the attestation, but they haven't signed, dated the invoice, and they both have to exist. And then just the cumulative things on that invoice of, people adding lines to the Excel spreadsheet and the calculations, then not calculating correctly. Some invoicing issues with receipts and numbers not matching up. And all of that has very quickly turned around. I think PR and the providers who have submitted it are working really quickly and closely together. So when I look at the tracking information, I've received it, I reviewed it, I've passed it back to the provider because this is missing, and the provider is resubmitting corrected, is happening extremely quickly. And so, we're learning as we go through this as well. Like I said, that provider name in the very first paragraph eluded everybody for the first week before we oh my gosh, what's happening? So, we've developed a checklist for ourselves. We'd be happy to share that. We've taken the form in the attestation in PDF and have highlighted the things that actually require you to do something, and we could share that as well. Trying to develop tools for the reviewers to make sure that they're capturing everything before it gets to Stacy and Gary, who, oh, but you missed this too. So we'd be happy to share the tools that we're using to review, because that might help people fill out the forms correctly. It's been very interesting. It's been actually really nice to see some of the things that providers have covered during COVID to support their staff. One provider prior to COVID was covering 60% of their employees' health insurance premiums, and during COVID, to help stabilize their organization and retain staff, they increased that and covered 100% of those. So it's really interesting process and really enlightening, and I think humbling to see what you providers are, expending and incurring, and how you're supporting your staff and the people that we serve. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Wanda. So any of the providers who have submitted for that funding already have anything that they want to share about the process? We accept all feedback too. Feedback is a gift.
This is Casey with LOPW, and we did submit that and found it to be very user-friendly, no issues on our side of things.
Okay. Any questions from the group out there about what they need to do? So Gary or Wanda, either one of you want to talk to about the deadline? So it can be ongoing, it's through end of December, but just speak a little bit about, you can submit multiple invoices, or did I miss, you already talked about that?
Sure. No, so the deadline, it says on the forms, is December 30th. And so if you submitted, one form for residential services and you haven't used your allocation, you can submit another one up to this, December 30th. You can submit multiple for the residential side. The day in employment is a one-time because you get your entire allocation. But on the residential side, if you have more expenses and you have room in your allocation left, you can submit another application.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Oh, just kind of watch the chat. Anybody else have anything they want to share about this funding source? So a quick question, and I do not profess to be an expert on these funding sources, that I don't have room in my brain for all of that. So a question to you, I know that the PPP application period is over, but isn't Congress looking at hopefully or possibly an extension or another round of PPP? Does anybody have any update or information on that so people know if they should be watching for it? Okay, well, we'll just have to follow the news, and if we hear anything, of course, we'll share it outwardly, and likewise, I think if you guys hear of something, share it with Erica or Jeff or Becky or whoever with MAC-DDS and the division, and we'll share that information out. So we all keep an eye out for it. Maybe we can get it. I would like to hear more from people who have received other funding sources that we haven't talked about yet. Peg, I know we haven't heard anything from you yet. Did you have anything that was above and beyond what we've talked about, or anything to share?
Let me see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to work all this. The only thing I wanted to add was just about the CARES Act money that went through our county, and just that we, I guess what I would say is it helps when your county administrator is Joanne Lycum, who is very well connected to the DD community, but she really helped make certain that our county was responsive, not just to DD providers, but to our all of our nonprofit providers by helping. And they really didn't, I don't think they felt comfortable with dollars going out. That wasn't something, I think they saw that that was going to be a really large process. So what they did was basically they were ordering PPE for the county and opened up that order to accommodate the needs of nonprofit providers. And I don't know at the end of the day how much they distributed, but I know that just to the DD providers, they distributed a great deal of PPE.
Nice.
And I think, yeah, and they're very open to kind of hearing if there's still, if there continues to be a need. And so it was just a way they could help. And I know a lot of communities are trying to figure out how to get some of those dollars from their county. That was one kind of easy way, really, because they already are ordering. And she said it's easier to order a bigger quantity. Sometimes it was easier to actually get more. The larger your order, I think it actually helped the county as well. So it was a one-time thing, but it really did, I think it did help in its own way. So that might be something that people talk with their counties about, where it's not dollars changing hands necessarily, but just getting resources out.
Yeah, that's nice. And it was so hard and so time consuming to try to track the PPE down too. So that was a benefit as well.
Right.
Jeff, do you want to, I'm sorry, Peg, did you have something else?
No.
Okay. Jeff, did you want to talk a minute about, does Mark still have grant money available? And do you want to talk a minute about that? His name just disappeared. So maybe he'll jump back on here, or it looks like we lost him. Casey, Todd, and Kathy, was it your group that talked about multiple other funding sources that you had applied to and gotten money from?
Yes, we haven't received any additional money other than what we've talked about, but we have applied for a couple of other things. The most recent one that is due here in about 3 days was the Missouri Nonprofit Relief and Recovery Grant. And you have to request an application from their website, and then they send it through you to through DocuSign. It does require some narrative and some goal setting and that kind of thing, kind of more like a typical grant looks like. But I think its deadline was 8/14.
Okay.
The things that could be included in there were pretty unlimited. I mean, what we applied for at LOQW was for hazard pay for our direct support, and then for some additional technology to continue to do remote services.
All right, thank you. And did you have another one that you said you had a couple?
The other ones are those county CARES Act funds that were just previously being talked about. And those are just dependent on the county as far as what they are requiring. So in our area, we go to the Mark Twain Council of Governments to get that information, their website, and each county is broken down for each application separate by county. So that's how we're applying to those currently.
Okay. And we got a message from Jeff that he can't unmute his phone. Can you help? With that?
I can, just give me just a second.
Okay, and while Heike is doing that and we're trying to get Jeff on the line, do any of our other panelists have any other funding sources that they could point the audience in the direction of?
All right, we should be able to get to Jeff.
Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, just real briefly, yeah, the MARF money we've got for technology, for health, for Station MD stuff, we still got people still accessing that, which has been a great benefit. I would wonder if the division, because I know there's a whole lot of CARES Act money in this state that's not being spent, or they're looking for reasons to expend. If there's any other areas that we should be thinking about providing you a proposal to take to the CARES Act gods that are handling all the money in Jeff City to see if there's something that they could do for DD. If that's the case, let me know. I'm on other calls, and I know there's other state agencies that are looking at opportunities to spend that money. So let me know if there's anything you want to do there. On the provider relief fund, just a really quick comment. I've talked to several providers that made a mistake and got mad and quit. All you need to do to change your application that maybe you had a mistake on is start over. Just start over, and your most recent application is the one that's basically going to be used. The other one just goes out in never land and it's gone. So I know that that's something people were concerned about. If they made a mistake, just start over.
Good advice. So Jeff, the money that you got through MARF, is that only for MARF members?
Yeah.
Only available? Okay.
Yeah, and I've actually offered to help write a grant. If they want to, if somebody wants to write a grant for families, I'll help them write the grant, and I bet they'll get the money. But I don't think that's something that MARF should be. I don't think that's something MARF should be managing for the state because of the families and everybody. There's other entities that could do that, I would think, and do a better job than we could. So I'll be happy to write the thing, and believe me, I think you get the money. All we got to do is find out who wants to be responsible and manage it.
Okay. All right, we can reach out to a couple of our partners here that might be able to do that. That's a good idea. Anything else from our panelists of things that they would like to share, experiences, or what's kind of gotten you through these really crazy, difficult times? Got about 6 minutes left.
This is me again. I guess the only other thing I would tell you, when the division's looking at numbers of people that are Medicaid providers that have not applied, are you taking into account the number of people that receive Medicare funding, so that like somebody said on the phone, they're not eligible for this group of money? Because I got to tell you, if we're telling everybody, if it's being shared across the provider network that we have less than 2% of the Medicaid providers that have applied or even visited this website or whatever it is now, that's pretty pitiful. So I wonder if we should, or somebody should, take a look and remove any Medicaid providers that are already in that first group of provider relief fund, because those folks, they cannot apply for this money. So it looks really goofy if we have such a low percentage. But if the real impact is a large number have already received, they're not even eligible for this round of funding. So I don't know if that's something you guys have looked into or not, but I really hate to think the message is out there that nobody's applying for this money, because I don't think that's the case. And I think the people that aren't applying are people that are not eligible to apply.
Okay, that's a good question. And Gary, I'm going to ask you to chime into that, because yeah, with those numbers, it just flies in the face of our efforts to improve rates. And it says that we really don't need the money, but we know that we do.
Yeah, so I think that's a stat coming out from HRSA that we probably just forwarded out. I will just say that, our tax ID as the state was not eligible, and I just got approvals. I'm not 100% sure why, but I'm going to press on and take them at their word and go ahead and submit an application on behalf of the state.
Yeah, and here's what happened, Gary, on that. They actually, anybody that received a small distribution in the first round, they can now return that money. And
Okay.
if you return that money, now you can actually you can actually be eligible for this amount of money. I know we've got an agency here in the state that got $1,000 in the first group of funding because they didn't know there was going to be more money and they didn't know how much they were going to get. They received $1,000, which is not even a 0.5% of their total gross revenue. So now with this process, they're going to be able to return that money, which means they didn't receive that money, and now they're eligible for this new funding stream. And I got to tell you, I think it is confusing for folks, but that's what's happened. Whereas you guys may have received a significant amount in that first round. I don't know. But everybody needs to make a decision which group of funding they want to be receiving.
Well, I'm okay having the nursing homes return theirs if we can get it for DD. No, thanks, Jeff. I haven't looked into it yet. Like I said, I just got the notice today. I was kind of surprised by it. So yeah, I haven't really looked into it yet, other than went online and checked our account and saw that we had been approved for an application, but it didn't say anything about returning the first round. So I'll check. Oh yeah, that's good to know though.
Yeah, maybe is there a way for us to check into that so that we can? I know Val's trying to work on the numbers and figure out that list and what the deal is. So maybe she's got an avenue to try there as well.
Yeah.
So we'll follow up with Val too, Jeff. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And in relationship to the PPP loan, Corey entered that say that the additional relief and stimulus funds are tied up in negotiations and stalled in Congress at this point. So I know that it seems that, as I recall, there's some money in there if they can ever come to resolution and find a middle ground there. So just watch for more opportunities, I guess, on that front.
Yeah,
I'm sure Corey will just watch for that too.
Yeah, just one last thing to end on a really good note. The person that got upset and actually quit their application because it was so confusing, I told them to start over. Here's what they just sent me. I resubmitted the application and was already notified the application was accepted and that will be funded. The application is significantly shorter and very easy to complete now. So basically, anybody on this call, if you haven't applied, you need to apply. Because if we get a statistic out at the end of this where less than 10% of the DD community went out and got this money based upon it being too difficult to get, that's a really bad story to tell next January. And I don't want to see Val sit in the chair and try to explain it, because it's not on her, it's on us as providers. So it's easier now. We need to get this done and get people applying if they can.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, well, I don't see any more items in the chat box. I want to thank our panelists for taking time out of their day to share their experience and share their phone numbers and emails to help others through the process. You guys are an amazing, awesome group that support each other so well. We're very fortunate to have such a great network of providers in Missouri. So thank you again for what you do every day. And stay tuned. We will be looking for other topic items that are of common interest for groups to come on and talk about. And we'll be setting those up on Tuesdays, but probably won't be doing a weekly Tuesday call. But so stay tuned and we'll let you know what that schedule is going to look like. So have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.